I'm Darien Lux, and today I'm going to be doing a review of Whitechapel, Mark of the Blade. Whitechapel's been one of the more popular bands in their genre for at least 10 years now. One of my favorite bands. They're one of the most popular and most influential bands of their era, I would say. Spawning many bands to follow suit and emulate their sound off of them. Younger bands from this generation have aspired to be similar to a Whitechapel, and they're just kind of one of those benchmark bands that younger kids, want to be like. Our Endless War, the last album they put out, well, it wasn't my favorite. I wouldn't call it a bad album. It was a decent album. It definitely had some production flaws and a bit monotonous at times, but it was it had some enjoyable moments on it as well. So let's get right into it. The album opens out with the track by the title of The Void, which is actually one of the better tracks on the album. It's not the exact best opening track to an album. I think they did much better job on the last album with, I think it was called Rise, the intro track, and then the title track, Our Endless War. It was a very grabbing song, I thought. Second, that snare hit, and then the rest of the band came in. You're like, all right, this is a Whitechapel album. Let's get to work. Let's listen to this thing. It's not a bad intro. Definitely not a bad way to open the album, but I just feel like they could have done a little better. But that's just being picky. The first minute of the song is pretty much the best part of the song, though, because after that, it kind of feels like they lost something. The first minute of the song is very moving, and you're liking the direction it goes, and then I guess the chorus kicks in, and you're like, it doesn't give you anything new. It's kind of a rehash material that you heard on Our Endless War. I wouldn't be surprised if this track was written during that time and just didn't make it on the album. Frankly, it feels like a good bit of this album that suffers from that. That could have been the case. It's a fun track to listen to, but if you're, the reason I like Whitechapel and New Era Corruption, each of the songs on those albums, they just give you something new, and starting off the album with a song that sounds rehashed, in my opinion, isn't the best move. And the sad thing is, it is one of the better tracks on the album. The second track on the album, however, I believe may be the worst track, or at least tied, or second place, I don't know. Anyways, Mark of the Blade, it just seems like a very uninspired, monotonous, boring track. Starts off with a heavy, chuggy riff. The guitar tone in this album just, I don't know, it's just missing. It sounds very, I'm pretty certain they use Axe effects, which I'm actually a fan of using Axe effects instead of using real amps. I think you can get some amazing sounds out of it, but I just think, like, for this style, Whitechapel's sound needs something, with more tenacity to it. It's a heavy, they're going for a heavy riff, and it's a very weak sound of the guitar, and it just doesn't work for me. The song Mark of the Blade doesn't give me anything. I don't get anything from listening to it. Just a very emotionless, boring track, and it's very disappointing coming from a band like Whitechapel, which I grew up listening to and have inspired me and thousands and thousands of other people. I do understand that bands change and go into different directions, which I'm a huge fan of bands doing that. It's just whenever they change to something less than what they did before, not as good, more mediocre, I can't really get behind that. And whether it was conscious effort or creativity ran thin, it is what it is. This track just doesn't really do it for me. The Elitist Ones, the track following up Mark of the Blade, is the first track to receive a music video, and I believe it came out on the same day as the album, June 24th. I watched the music video, and music videos these days, it's hard. They're hard to find an amazing one, and I understand. They can be very expensive. I understand that. but I'm not here to review the music video. This song is probably, I would say, one of the worst vocal deliveries on the album. It just feel. I mean, and I love Phil's vocals. It just feels like to me he kind of just, said I'm just gonna do this track and didn't really put much effort into it. I mean, I'm not saying I could do better at all. I'm just saying it feels like he didn't try. I mean, a lot of this album feels like it's missing effort or it's just missing some kind of substance. It's rehashed and just another disappointing track, that doesn't offer anything new. And I'm really missing out on that. And I feel like fans in general want something new, especially from a band like Whitechapel that has given that before. Whitechapel sounds different than New Era Corruption. Songs like I Dementia and the last track on the album, which I can't remember the name of right now. Sorry for that, but those songs were very different. Not as fast, but still very heavy, and they gave you something new. And then even on Our Endless Warrior, songs like Diggs Road, more emotional with very melodic, amazing solo towards the end, and just moving tracks. And I feel like this album isn't offering anything of substance. Fourth track on the album is the most polarizing track on the album, Bring Me Home. It's the first track that I know of where Whitechapel decided to introduce clean vocals, and that is always a touchy subject in the metal community. I don't hate the idea of Whitechapel introducing clean vocals. However, this song is so soft that it just doesn't fit anywhere in Whitechapel's catalog. Even when they heavy it up in the chorus and bring the screams back in, and in the later parts of the song they heavy it up. It just the soft parts in the song are so soft that they don't fit on this album. They sound very Stone Sour-esque. Also, the intro, very reminiscent of Disposition by Tool, which is my favorite band. However, I don't think it fits in Whitechapel's sound. I'm not saying that they can't experiment, which I think all bands should. It's just, I think experiments can go wrong sometimes, and this track for me is a bit of a failure for that. And I'm not saying the band isn't capable of creating, a more accessible song, which they obviously are. I just don't think this was the right angle for them to take. Super soft and very singy, singy. The track after that is called Tremors. It features a very Deftones-esque groove metal riff. Not a terrible idea for this band. I mean, they've had Chino Moreno from the Deftones feature on a track before. It just another one of the songs that doesn't offer much to me. I listen to it and I'm just like, could be worse. Could be a lot better though. Because I know what this band's capable of. Following that is Killing Industry. First second I heard this song, I immediately thought of Slipknot Nomadic, and some of the songs previous have also given me a Slipknot aftertaste. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. The intro riff for this song really reminds me of Slipknot, and the verse sounds a lot like Heretic Anthem. The whole track just sounds like a Slipknot song, and I like Slipknot, but I don't want Whitechapel to sound like Slipknot. I don't want anyone to sound like Slipknot, because you shouldn't want to sound like Slipknot. You should want to sound like yourself. I just feel like this song is very, very, very similar to Slipknot, and that's not a good thing, I would say. I wouldn't want to write something and someone say, hey, that sounds a lot like so-and-so. I'm not going to say they tried to rip off Slipknot, but it's pretty close. It's a little too close for comfort. And A Killing Industry, the second I read that, I thought of the lyrics in Heretic Anthem, where they say the industry killer or something like that. Anyway, I know it's in there, and it's very, very close to Slipknot, a little too close for comfort. Next up is the track called Brotherhood, which is one of the best songs on the album, if not the best. It's a about 4-minute long instrumental track, and I think this song is the direction I would want this album to be in. It's very dark, very grim, scary atmosphere, almost Behemoth-esque, but not in the death metal way. It just feels like it's very Scandinavian or black metal-esque, The track is reminiscent of stuff you'll hear on New Era Corruption and This Is Exile. And I think this track, kind of brings the album, a little closer to their roots, making it not a complete departure from their sound. Next up is the song Feminist, which is one of the heavier tracks on the album. However, the intro to this song reminds me of Disturbed, and I want to say the song is Avarice or Avarice. I don't know how to pronounce it anyway, but listen to that song and listen to Feminist, and you'll know exactly what I mean. Just again, Too Close for Comfort. I mean, I don't think Whitechapel decided to rip off Disturbed, but it is very, very close. That being said, it's a good track. I mean, I can listen to it. I don't hate this song. One of the better songs on the album, but again, this album has a trend of being monotonous and bland and boring, and it's just very disappointing. The last track on the album, not a satisfying closer for me. They brought back the clean vocals that you heard in Bring Me Home, and I think if they were to do that in a very strong chorus, it would work, but the chorus in the song is just kind of weak. It's definitely better than Bring Me Home, but I just want more for an album closer. It is the longest track on the album, so it's not the worst album closer, but it's not. It's just missing power and tenacity and aggressiveness. A band like Whitechapel, I shouldn't be able to say that. This has been known for being super heavy, brutal, tenacious, aggressive, and this album is just lacking in all those departments. Overall, the album is very similar to Our Endless War in that the production is just not that satisfying. The guitar tone is not the best I've ever heard. I much prefer the guitar tone to the earlier albums. Also, Phil's vocals on the last two albums are just, they're getting to this point where he is ignoring his highs and kind of does his lows, but he just ends somewhere in the mid-range, which is more throaty and less emotional. It seems like it has less effort behind it, and I'm just not a fan because Phil Bozeman is known as one of the best vocalists in deathcore, death metal, metalcore, whatever you want to call it. And these last two albums, he just kind of sits there in the mid-range, which it's not bad. I mean, Phil Bozeman couldn't do a bad track on vocals, I think, because he's that good, but he's not utilizing his range, which he has done on older albums. And it's sad because, that's one of the things you want to hear on a Whitechapel album. You want to hear, amazing drum tracks, amazing guitar tracks with this nasty guitar tone, and you want to hear Phil Bozeman go super low, super high, and all over the place, but he just doesn't do that anymore. The band does not do that in the past two albums. Mark of the Blade is not a terrible album. However, it's just not a Whitechapel album, or not a very good one at least. I feel like it's a very uninspired, monotonous effort. I'm feeling a 4 out of 10 on this album, with my favorite track being Brotherhood, the instrumental. Least favorite track, probably Mark of the Blade. Very disappointed in this album, and I hope that doesn't mean that all the future Whitechapel albums are just going to go downhill as well. I think the band has a lot of potential to make another amazing album, and I don't want it to sound exactly like This Is Exile. I don't want it to sound like New Era Corruption. I just want it to sound good. I don't care. They could do an album entirely clean vocals, and if it's good, I'll like it. It's not the point. I just want a good Whitechapel album, and I didn't get that this time around. But it happens, every band has a bad album, or every band is capable of making a bad album. So I feel 4 out of 10 with this album. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and hopefully I can make, if you guys like it, I'll make more album reviews. Have a good one.